Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be teaching you how to do some floral watercolors and using a technique with masking fluid. But before we get started, let me introduce you to this amazing book. This is one of my reference books and I highly recommend it, mostly because the photography is just phenomenal. You can get some really detailed images and pictures and really get up close for textures and color references. So I really love this book. I will list it below. It's in one of my supplies favorites. It's called the Flower Book. So for today's video, I'm using a Icelandic poppy and it'll be a little bit loose, but we are going to be adding a few details and layers and using the masking fluid for part of the technique. So as you can see from the image, it's a little bit of a saucer-like shape. These florals are wide and have very delicate petals with little lines and textures. So we'll try to recreate that. So grab your jars of water, your watercolor paper, brushes, and paints. I have two versions of masking fluid. One is an open, large opening top where you can paint or use a tool to put it on, and the other one is a fine liner. So this is really great for small details and really thin, delicate textures. So that's what I'll be using today. I can also list this in my supplies and link it below in the description. I have my favorite brushes here. These are round brushes. I usually choose something between a 6 or an 8 or a 10. I'll be using the larger one today so we can get those wide floppy petal shapes. Okay, so I have my 140-pound Arches paper, and I'm going to start with that masking fluid by making a little center shape in the middle of the flower and then pulling out small thin lines where all the little yellow parts are. And a second flower just to the right. Similar technique, a little bit in the middle and then thin lines pulling out from the center. Here's a little close-up so you can see what it looks like when it's freshly put down. It's still wet, and so with masking fluid you want to wait till it is 100% dry before you start painting. Okay, so this is it dry and what it looks like. So it acts like a resist and it's a bit of a rubbery texture, and so it's waterproof when it's fully dry. If you have a heat gun that's for crafts, you can use that to dry it and speed up the process. Otherwise, you just sit and wait and let it 100% dry. Mixing up a little bit of a pinky red with a little bit of an orange, touch of orange in there. I'll start putting in the floral petals in that circular shape, a little bit like a saucer. So just remember the back petals will be a little bit longer because they're towards the back, and the ones that are coming into the foreground, they're going to be a little bit shorter to show they're coming towards you. If you're interested in the exact colors that I'm using, I'll link my palette setup video. I have all my colors listed and it shows you how I chose to arrange them on the palette. It's sort of set up like a color wheel. So I'll link that below if you're interested. Okay, and then we can drop in a little bit of yellow into the center of those flowers, just putting it right over that masking fluid. And so wherever the masking fluid is, it'll stay white like the paper, and that yellow will just blend in with the pinkish tones and colors there. While it's still wet, you can go in and add a little bit more definition to some of the edges of your petals, add in some deeper colors. I'm going in with a little bit more of a saturation. I always start light to dark. It's so much easier to add in layers and colors. It's a lot harder to take paint away, so I always recommend starting light. You can always add in more color. Okay, and then rinsing my brush, I'm going in with some green and adding in those stems, some loose leaves and some loose leaves and some greenery. I do have a video on painting leaves and greenery. I'll link that as well. If you are interested in doing more of a focus on greenery, you can check out that video. If you find that you have too much paint or water anywhere, you can always use a little bit of a clean paper towel and soak up some of that extra water and color. Alright, so now that that first layer has dried, I'm going in with a little bit of a smaller brush and adding in some more saturation and paint and color into each of these florals. Once the darker color is on there, I'm rinsing my brush, and then just with a clean damp brush, I'm going in and softening some of those edges. I still want to keep it loose, so I'm not doing every single mark, but just a few of them. All right, and now that that center has fully dried, I'm going in and just rubbing off that masking fluid. So you can use this with just your finger, or you can use an eraser or another tool, but I find it just quick to just use the tip of your finger and just do it in a gentle circular motion. You don't want to do it too hard, you can rip your paper that way, but it should come off pretty easily. So you can see where the masking fluid was, the paper is completely protected. It acted like a resist, and so the white of the paper is clean and it's dry, and you can go in now with some fresh color. This is a great technique to use when you want to put lighter colors on top of darker colors. So you'll need the white of the paper for that lighter color to show up. You won't see a light color when you try to paint it over a dark color in watercolor, and that's because the medium is so transparent. However, if you were using something like acrylics, you wouldn't really need to worry about that because it's very opaque. All right, so now that I have a little bit of green in that center, you can really see that because it's directly on the white paper. And then I'm adding in a little bit more of a brighter yellow around the center portion. All right, so while the center is dry fully, I'm going in and adding a little bit more color and definition on each of these petals with a bit more paint, and then rinsing my brush, and with a damp brush pulling in some lines to add some more texture. I'll go ahead and speed up part of this video because it's the same technique. I'm just doing it to every petal on both flowers. Okay, and now for the final touches, once your other layers have dried, I'm going in and adding some darker shadows. You can always do this in stages as well. I'm adding a little purple and blue into some of the shadows, and then rinsing my brush again and then softening out some edges. All right, and then adding in some shadows and details onto the stems and leaves as well. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it was fun, and if it was your first time learning about masking fluid, I invite you to try it out. It's a really fun technique. You can always use it in so many different ways. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.